Hello and welcome. Today we've got Miki Klann with us. We are going to be discussing tribulation, prophecy, Trump, Antichrist, revelations, all of the interesting stuff that's happening right now that's becoming historic. Now, just before we begin, I would like for everyone to subscribe to my Telegram channel and to my free newsletters at nicholasveniamin.com. Now, if you're watching this for the first time on YouTube, I will leave the link below in the description for the full interview. Miki, thank you for joining me. Where do we begin with this? Because we did another interview and I had so many questions for you about Antichrist and other things like that. So where do we begin?
I know, it was so good. You caught me off guard, which I love. You make me think. So I had to go back and do a bunch of research and now I can, I'm ready to go.
Right.
So if you don't mind, let me share my screen and we'll jump right into it because I don't even know how long this is going to take. I just always come prepared,
Yeah, that's fine. You can share the screen. You can share screen now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start this. Okay, here we go. So last time you asked me, who is the Antichrist? And that is, obviously a complex question. And there are many doctrines out there that have different answers for that. So let's go through that first. And then I'm so excited to share the story of the Ark of the Covenant. Have you heard that yet?
It rings a bell, but we can go into
it.
Yeah.
Okay, because they found it. And so it's kind of a really amazing story. So I'm excited to tell that to you today. And then you also asked me, what is the rapture? So I've taken some time to dig a bit more on that as well. And then timelines and completion dates. There are actually some very specific biblical timelines that have all come true. And so hopefully we can give some people some excitement about what's to come here in the next month. All right?
Very exciting.
So in our first interview, we talked a lot. We kind of did a whole sort of tour through the stars where I explained how sort of this was the midpoint of the tribulation as it states in Revelation 12. So on September 23rd, 2017, a great sign appeared in the heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon at her feet, and a crown of 12 stars above her head, right? So you have the 9 stars from Leo and the 3 wandering planets or stars, Venus, Mars, and Mercury, creating a crown of 12 stars above her head. And she cried out in pain because she had just given birth to Jupiter, which did a full retrograde in her womb, right? So this is really where the astronomers paid attention. So if anybody who's watching this today hasn't seen our part 1, you might want to check that out first. We'll link it below. But I think what I'm going to do is kind of pick up from where we left off, right?
Okay.
So one of the things a lot of people ask me, or they all give me a hard time about, is like, no, the tribulation hasn't started because we haven't seen the rise of the Antichrist, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of like, well, you might want to go back and check to see where you're getting some of your scholarly doctrine from, because, if we trusted every doctor right now, we might be in trouble. If we trusted every, politician, we might be in trouble, right? So this guy, Walter Veith, does an amazing job. We'll link his video as well, but it's just an amazing amount of information he goes into about the beast and about the Antichrist. But he pretty much proves that the Antichrist rose right after the fall of Rome. And the fall of Rome was like, I don't know, it was like 400 BC, no, AD, after death.
It has to be after death, yeah.
Yeah, and basically it explains in the Bible that 10 horns, which mean kingdoms, would rise after the fall of Rome, and that there would be an additional horn, a little horn, that had a face of the man that would be different from all the rest. And then he explains that 3 would then fall. And he tracks all that back in history. But not only that, he explains how these 2 authors, these Jesuit scholars, right, also rose up from the rise of this Roman Catholic Church, who essentially pushed the dogma that the Antichrist would not show up until either way, way in the past or way, way in the future, the end times. So he wouldn't rise until the end times. So anyway, I'll probably butcher these names, but Robertel and Alcazar were Jesuit scholars who wrote this doctrine after the rise of the Roman Catholic Church and violate every biblical principle by stating that the Antichrist is either way in the past or far in the distant future. So, maybe go back and review where you're getting your information from and revisit. Like, I'm all about learning some of this stuff for the first time and demystifying it and taking some of the fear away from the story of Revelation, because it's actually a story of where God wins, right? And so I think a lot of people are terrified of the term apocalypse and the term, Revelation, and, because it's a confusing story, and the story of horns being kingdoms is it's almost like a metaphorical story, right? So people kind of have to wrap their heads around that. So anyway, I really recommend watching his entire film. And I also really recommend Melissa Red Pill the World. I actually met with her. So amazing. This woman is like, she's just so knowledgeable about the Bible. And she's been talking about this stuff ever since Q came out. So she's on Freedom Force Battalion, and she's got a book called End Times, 1,000 Years of Peace, where she really breaks down the fact that the United Nations is, in fact, the Antichrist. So let's take a look at United Nations just for a second, right? What do you see in the middle of this logo?
I see the map of the flat earth.
Well, yeah, right? And we are in the bull's eye, where there are 33 quadrants in the bullseye. And we've got the olive leaves or branches, which represent the natural or human rights or the natural law that Sagittarius was protecting, right? In the battle in the stars that we went over. But I find it very interesting that we are in the bull's eye. And I don't know if you've looked much at the flat earth theory. If we talked about this a year ago, I would have thought, no way.
I have, yeah. Vaguely, yeah. So basically, what we're seeing in front of us now with that logo, that's the bullseye, and then the whole map is the bullseye, and then outside of that are other 33 islands around it.
Well, actually, it's 33 quadrants. So if you had 1, 2, 3, 4 times 8 here, plus 1 in the middle, is how you get to the 33 quadrants, right? So they've just taken complete control over our flat earth. And in some ways they sort of mock us. Like, here's what's fascinating. And I'm just going to just dive into this really quick because I find this really interesting. So in Stellarium, if you look at the characters that we kind of talked about, right? Draco, which is the dragon of the sea, is right in the center. If this was a dome and the red line here is the ecliptic, he sits right at the top of the Earth's torus, right? The energy field that goes up and around. Therefore, he's sort of taken dominion over in this sort of draconian law, right? This dominion over us, so to speak. And a lot of those characters that we are against are on the outside, right? So you've got the Hydra, you've got the Scorpio, then you've got Aquarius pouring water over the line. But then you also have this whole story of Orion versus the Taurus, and the entire city of Rome, after they rebuilt it and they rebuilt the Vatican City, is all in the shape of Orion. And if you look just below Orion, there's the first rabbit, follow the white rabbit. Mm-hmm. And in the stories, Orion has this sort of, the rabbit is its prey on islands. And even below that, you have this entire sea called Eridanus. I think of it as sort of the Sea of Souls. So there's a battle going around the outer rim. All right. So the way Jason Q would put that is the Terra, the outer. So if the world, or the globe, or sort of not the globe, but the dome is the Terra, and the outside of the dome is the extra, the extraterrestrial, right? So it's the extra territory, the world beyond Antarctica, which we've never seen, could be the extraterrestrials or the outer space. Mm-hmm. Okay. So anyway, it's interesting to consider the fact that we are their target. And if you really go into the Roman, traditions, it was always bullfighting. It was always Orion versus the bull. And how do you outsmart a bull but with a red cape, right? And so if you can outsmart the bull, the Taurus, the free will, the energy field that goes around us. So the Taurus also means energy field. So I don't know if you know this, but you can take a pitchfork and you can ting it and come close to someone's body, and it will change pitch when you come into its energy field. So that also stands for your free will. So it's always been a battle between the Orion and the free will of the Taurus, I believe. This is just looking at what's on the Egyptian pyramids. You know, the pyramids of Giza were also in the same shape of the belt of Orion, and they believed that they could ascend into the gods by the chambers and so on. So anyway, I think that, and I think I'm basically on the same page with Melissa Red Pill the World, that United Nations is the Antichrist. It is different from the rest. It has the face of many men. It basically represents multiple countries. If you think about, if you don't comply with the New World Order, you know what I mean? What happens to you as a country? I mean, the United States was sort of the military arm of the cabal. And if a country like Iraq or Afghanistan or Iran didn't play nice, you know, they pretty much created a false flag event and sent us all to war. So I think that when you actually do look at, so it says in the Bible that the Antichrist would commit blasphemy. And again, that's a really good one. Go back and watch those videos I'm suggesting. The popes pretty much had said on multiple occasions, you have to pray through us. You cannot pray directly to God. And so the Pope definitely works for the United Nations in connection with Obama, who also, it said in the Bible that the Antichrist, see, I think people are confused at thinking that it's one man, but it's not. It's the face of many countries, right? It's the combination of. And so at one point it said that the Antichrist would rise up and it would promise peace with Israel. And then it would later betray Israel. So Obama very specifically created these peace, you know, these treaties with Israel, and Trump is just railing on him. You know, it's just one after another. You know, he's basically saying, just in every one of these tweets, you know, Obama is, you know, screwing up with Israel. And, you know, I don't know all these people he's talking to, but blank is absolutely right. It will be a nightmare for Israel if Obama is reelected. You know, he's saying via hard Zoom, Donald Trump calls Obama Israel's greatest enemy. You know, so he's definitely paying attention, and he's definitely calling out Obama with respect to his policies in Israel. And then sure enough, just before Trump takes office, Obama, I think this is very fascinating. It says President Barack Obama has decided to go out with a bang. Interesting choice of words. Out with a bang. I still wonder when they took Obama, but this happens to be one day in the story that I explained, with the second that Jupiter enters the womb of the Virgin, where Charlie Freak claims that on December 24th, 2016, Trump sent, you know, the military to take out the 13 royal families, the no fail mission. So that would be fascinating, because again, in the tribulation, or in the story of the Bible, it says that, you know, halfway through the tribulation is when, you know, the Antichrist would essentially turn on Israel and basically renege on all of its promises. So here you have the day after Trump declares war against the 13 royal families. If all that happened, that's amazing. You know, that is
who
insane.
wrote this? President Barack Obama has decided to go out with a big bang. Who wrote that?
This was in an article. I can find it for you. I forget who wrote that, but I mean, I thought that was fascinating. This also adds up to 17. So yeah, I'll give you the link for that below, because I forget the name of the publication, but I was just kind of researching on the headlines. But see, this is what I mean by future proves past. I mean, so much of the Bible is almost something where you have to go back and read it. It's like Q 1.0, you know what I mean? And it makes a lot more sense when you have 20/20 vision. Than when you were first learning some of this stuff, right? And plus, there's so much deception in it, you know? So you kind of have to blow the dust off the Bible and revisit it, because I'm looking at it with very fresh eyes. You know, I don't really have any pre-existing, you know, notions about any of it. So, all right. So I want to tell you the story about the Ark of the Covenant, because this is so cool. Do you have any questions about the Antichrist? I know I could probably talk for a whole hour on that.
No, that's okay. We'll go into that a little bit after, because it might overlap with this.
Okay, cool. Well, okay. So the Ark of the Covenant, let me just give a little bit of background. I know this is a big slide, but it's just really important that I explain some of the background story on this. Okay. So Moses, received instructions by God after he received the 10 commandments. And this is all discussed on Exodus 25 through 31. So he receives instructions to build the Ark of the Covenant, and a sanctuary, or a tabernacle is another word for it, where God could dwell among his people. So this was kind of a traveling piece. So the ark was constructed in 1446 BC, and it was portable. And it was acacia wood, like a chest covered with gold, that contained the 2 tablets of stone inscribed with the 10 commandments, the oral Torah. So remember that word. And were given to Moses by God on Mount Sinai. On top, facing each other, were 2 golden cherubim, which some think are lions and others think are bulls. I would probably assume they are bulls with human heads and outstretched wings, forming a throne or a mercy seat. So the mercy seat was right on top here. So the mercy seat was a judgment seat in which God could dispense justice. And it's where they would pour the sacrifice on top, or the blood of the sacrifice, or the lamb. So the ark was God's presence on earth. And they believed that if they carried this with us, if they carried this with them, that they had, good luck, right? It would protect them when they were traveling. So, but they couldn't touch it. Like if you touched it, you can only touch like the poles. And I don't even know if the poles were wooden. I think in this depiction, they're wooden, but I think they were actually made of gold as well. But anyway, you can only touch the poles during the transport, because there were stories like of how people stole the ark, and people in the village just started dying, because it was very dangerous. And there was even a story where people like stuck the ark on a cart and put an ox in the front and just like smacked the ox and said, "Get this thing out of here because it's killing our villagers," right? But it was kept in a back holy room. Each year, the priest would go and make an offering for the sins of the people. He would take the blood of the sacrifice and pour it on the east side of the mercy seat. This is how people repented for their sins and reconnected with God. So this is like one of those really rare pieces that has, not only the story of how to live your life, but also a way to repent for your sins. So this tabernacle, or tent of the Lord's presence, was a structure of curtains made of the finest linen and expensive yarns. So they put up this like tent, and they would have all these items inside the tent, which all were very relevant in giving the offering. So outside, let me actually move this over here. So they also had this whole like boundary that they would put up, and outside they had this large bronze sacrificial 4-horned altar for burnt offerings, and a bronze washing bowl for the priests so they could wash themselves before they entered. And then inside there was like the priests would wear this ephod, which is like a sleeveless top with golden shoulder straps incorporating gemstones that were meant to like give them divinity and power, engraved with the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. So I don't know if you have to move my head around, but I could keep moving our heads. So that's this guy right here, this ephod. And you see this a lot with the Essenes. I don't know if you've ever heard of Jesus and the Essenes, but that's also a pretty awesome story I'll talk about here at the end. But anyway, so they also wore this woven linen tunic, a blue robe, embroidered sash, a linen turban. Now, this is all important when we talk about the discovery. Inside the tabernacle was the golden lampstand with 7 basically little bowls so that they could put olive oil in there and burn from a wick, I believe. So it wasn't actually candles then, but it was burning from olive oil. And the golden table of shewbread, so they could make offerings of bread, and the golden altar of incense, which is this guy right here. The incense represented our prayers, and also it was a scent that God appreciated, and the Ark of the Covenant, right? So that's kind of this setup. But as they traveled, eventually, King David came, and he basically beat, like against all odds, it's sort of that David and Goliath story where King David took power over Israel and set up a temple in Jerusalem. And he was the root of David, right? So he was the first of the tribe of Judah. and he was the king of all 12 tribes of Israel. So he started the temple, but his son or successor Solomon eventually installed the Ark of the Covenant in the temple of Jerusalem, right? So this was a really sacred location. It had finally found its home, all that good stuff. But then when Rome was invaded by the Babylonians, Nebuchadnezzar laid siege to Jerusalem, and they removed all the items from the temple. And they took very specific documentation of every item that they took out of there, except for the Ark of the Covenant. That was never found. And so no one knew where it was until now, which is kind of exciting, right?
Right.
And again, because this thing had magical powers, it wasn't like you could just stroll out with it. You know, it was like over 700 pounds, and you weren't going to just like run off with it when you're in the middle of an invasion, right? So in comes Ron Wyatt. This is 1982. Well, I think he was looking for 3 years prior to that, but 1982-ish. Ron Wyatt, this archaeologist who also found Noah's Ark and like these Egyptian chariots under the water where Moses parted the Red Sea. And also he found the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. So this is a like pretty legit dude, right? It's definitely worth looking into. Well, anyway, one day he was doing his archaeology research for the parting of the Red Sea, the area up north, when he got really sunburned and he had to go back down to Tel Aviv. But then when he was feeling better, he decided to head on up to Jerusalem and do some sightseeing. So he's walking along this stone quarry known as the Calvary Escarpment. And just suddenly, like out of nowhere, he just points his hand over to this area, this trash dump, and says, "That's Jeremiah's grotto, and the Ark of the Covenant is in there." And he had no idea why he thought this or said this. He wasn't even familiar and had no plans of searching for the Ark of the Covenant. And of course, the tour guide that's with him knows how famous he is. And he's like, "Awesome, we'll put you up. Come on back. We'll make sure that you have, food and a place to stay and permits, etc." Right? So Ron decides to come back and do more research in this area. So the temple that we just talked about that held the Ark of the Covenant was right down here. And these were those city walls, right? And up here was Jeremiah's grotto. Now, everything in Jerusalem is like stone, even like far down. That's why there's so many caverns and caves and catacombs and so on, is because it's all made of stone. And so it was very easy for them to dig tunnels back then, right? Hidden tunnels. So during the time of the invasion of Nebuchadnezzar, Jeremiah was very poor and lived in the caves under the dump outside the city. He was a really godly man, and he always spoke of God, which made him an outcast. And during the invasion, he told many people to flee because they'd sinned so bad. And so he was kind of in the good graces of Nebuchadnezzar, or at least off of his radar. But so Jeremiah's grotto is known as the Garden Tomb, which is right by where Jesus was crucified and resurrected. So this is actually the resurrection site, and this is the entrance to the tomb where he resurrected. So basically I think this was the location, and it was extended because he was so tall. And I don't know if you can read this, but it says, "He's not here, for he is risen." So it was also really close to the road because they always wanted to make a huge scene when they were going to crucify someone, to say, "Don't do what this guy did," right? Like, don't stand forward, don't speak out, don't, do as we say, right? So Ron starts this excavation, and he's there for like 3 years. I mean, they're looking and looking, and he's just thinking, "Oh my gosh, what am I even doing here? I am wasting my time." And sure enough, as he's in the midst of this dig, he has this random man walk up to him, kind of looks like he's, wearing Jesus sandals and, white robe or whatever. And he just kind of puts his hand on Ron's shoulder, and he says, "You're doing a good thing here." And so Ron's like, "Who the heck was that? What on earth is going on?" Well, anyway, very soon after they were kind of digging through all the catacombs, they had located where Jesus had been crucified, and they had located an area or crack in the rock where he'd been crucified. But anyway, so they found this really, really small hole, and he sent his really skinny guy, James, down through this really small hole to check it out. Well, next thing you know, James is like halfway down the hole and he's freaking out. He's like, what's in there? What's in there? You know, I'm not going back. Whatever the heck that is, I'm out of here. And he literally leaves the site and never comes back because he felt a feeling he'd never felt before. So of course, now Ron's all excited and he digs a bigger hole and he starts going in and so on, right? So people can read more about this if they want to, because I feel like it's so well written by him on his website. But anyway, nonetheless, Ron ends up crawling down. He's crawling over all these rocks, right? And he's got his flashlight and he comes across this stone that was broken in half. Right. And he can see, he's looking up in the outcropping. He can actually see the opening of the crack from above. So he knows at this point that this is like a crack. I don't know if you know this, but there was an earthquake when Jesus was crucified.
Right.
And there was a huge crack that he'd found up above. And as he's crawling down, he can see not only the crack, but he can see this black substance within the crack. And he's wondering, what is that? So he crawls closer and closer. And then he realizes that this stone like top had been cracked open so that the blood could run down in. And he could even see remnants of black substance on side of the stone. So it turns out that when Jesus was crucified, the blood ran all the way down that crack of the earthquake and onto the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant.
Right.
How crazy is that? So what they're thinking happened was that it was moved from the temple underground through the cave systems, the tunnel systems, only to be placed directly under where Jesus would later be crucified, right? Because Nebuchadnezzar took over, the temple well before Jesus came. And so how crazy is it that you end up with this entire earthquake creating the perfect crack and the perfect crack in the stone in order to allow all the blood of Jesus Christ to flow onto the mercy seat, the ultimate sacrifice for our sins, right?
Mm-hmm.
Insane. Wow. So it says Matthew 27:51, and behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from top to bottom, and the earth did quake and the rocks rent. So at this point, this is one more view of this. So Ron, I think he has a book on Amazon because I got this as a cover and then I couldn't find it again because I want to give you the link. But here he is crawling, into this sort of cave. But here's where the entrance to the tomb was, where Jesus was resurrected. And this is where he was crucified. But then right here was that Golgotha, which is the place of the skull. Again, they would take these people up on this hill and they would write these signs, Jesus of Nazareth and the things that they did wrong, so as to make a huge statement to anyone else to don't stand against us, right? So anyway, Golgotha is a skull-shaped hill in ancient Jerusalem in the site of Jesus' crucifixion. The hill of execution was outside the city walls of Jerusalem, apparently near a road not far from where Jesus was buried. So anyway, if you look at all this stone, this back here is where the ark must have been found. Well, so he decided to take this blood to a lab and have it tested. Mm-hmm. Because he thought, well, let's see. And so he didn't tell the lab technicians what it was. He actually took the blood and he mixed it with like a saline solution, and he brought the blood into the lab. And the next day he shows up to the lab and they're like, where did you get this? Where did you get this blood? We've never seen anything like it. It only has 24 chromosomes. So normal blood has 46 chromosomes, 23 from mom, 23 from your dad. And the X or Y tells if you're male or female, right? Well, Jesus only had 24 chromosomes, 23 from his mother and only 1 from his father. Isn't that crazy?
That is very crazy.
Yeah. So I think people should fact check this information. It's so amazing. Like, it's hard to know at this point, anything is possible, right? But I really thought that was such an amazing story, because not only that, but he found all these things in this catacomb, right? So the chamber was 22 feet long by 12 feet wide. Well, you've got 22 is 11, 11, and 22 chapters of Revelation, 12 feet wide. 12 is everywhere in Revelation, right? We're in chapter 12 and the sign of the Son of Man, which I just showed you. There's 12, retrogrades around for Jupiter. There's 12 years it takes for Jupiter retrograde. Anyway, these are very biblical numbers. So he found the Ark of the Covenant in the stone case. He found the table of shewbread. He found the golden altar of incense. He found that golden censer, the 7-branched candlestick, aka lampstand, right? Which we see in Revelation, which it basically doesn't have the candles, but it has these bowls, which again, like I said, they had the olive oil in. He found a very large sword. I find that super interesting. The ephod, which are again, all the stones that they carried on their chest. Those were also worn by the Essenes. A turban or a mitre with an ivory pomegranate on the tip. And then a few other items, but he also talks about how he found certain books. Like, so on the back, under the mercy seat, on the back of the table, there was a book of law, and is presumably one Moses himself wrote. The best of Ron's knowledge, the book of Genesis was not there, only Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, Deuteronomy. Sorry, I always mess that one up. And the thing that amazed Ron was that these scrolls written in animal skins are still in perfect condition. So all of that is talked about in Revelation, right? Revelation 11:9, then God's temple in heaven was opened, and within his temple was seen the Ark of the Covenant. What? So it was meant to be found in this time. And this was found
Revelations, yeah.
Yeah, it was in 1982 that he found. In fact, it was only a year away from when they came out with Indiana Jones. I think it was like Temple of the Lost Ark or something. Anyway, that's really interesting, right? But then on Revelation 4:5, from the throne came flashes of lightning, rumblings, and peals of thunder. In front of the throne, 7 lamps were blazing. These are the 7 spirits of God. And those are the 7 stories of the churches that were under God's review, basically, like you know what I mean? Revelation 8:5, the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and hurled it on earth. And there came peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. So again, you've got the altar, you've got the censer. The censer is what held the incense, right? And I believe that whole piece was the hurricane crossfire, because you had crossfire. So you have the cross on the altar. They are filling the censer with fire, and he throws it on earth. Anyway, Trump did tweet at that time 7 devastating revelations about crossfire hurricane. And I just found it fascinating, because I never knew what that meant until I started looking into the Bible. Anyway, after this, I looked and I saw in heaven the temple that is the tabernacle of the covenant law, and it was open. So again, remember I said he found the book of law. These all have been kept from us, right? But these may have actually been protected on purpose. Anyway, and then I love the story about the sword. So in that day, which is when the Redeemer comes, the Lord will punish with his sword, his fierce, great, and powerful sword, Leviathan, the gliding serpent, which is serpents, Leviathan, the coiling serpent, which is Hydra, and he will slay the monster of the sea, which is the Draco. And another really interesting thing that Jason JQ brought up to me is he said that I think he said Germany were building submarines named Dracon and Leviathan.
Right.
You can't make this stuff up.
No, it's really interesting.
Yeah. So any questions about the Ark of the Covenant? Isn't that crazy?
It's very crazy. I'm blown away. I never knew this.
Right?
Yeah. And the chromosome, it's...
Yeah, and I'm going to link the story below of Ron's testimony, because he'll make you cry. I mean, if anybody is looking to red pill someone, You got to send a Melissa's video on the Ark of the Covenant and Ron's video, because it is so touching. Like, you're crying at the end of it, because he's basically saying, I don't know why I was chosen for this, but he felt strongly that he was visited by angels when he was excavating. And they told him to share this story of the 10 commandments and the blood when we were challenged with the mark of the beast. And he's talking about how they're going to make up this huge story about how we absolutely must take this mark, right? Which I believe are the vaccines. And he said, but just remind them, do not break the vow of the 10 commandments. And in one of the 10 commandments, it is, thou shalt not kill. And I'm sorry, but why do we have fetal tissue in this vaccine again? Doesn't that kind of turn us into cannibals?
So are you saying that the vaccine will turn the vaccinated into cannibals?
I'm not saying that I know. I'm saying it's really weird.
And because just repeat that again. So what's in the vaccines that could turn them into cannibals? That's in it?
The fetal tissue from,
making them crave. Making them
So I think that, again, by supporting a vaccine, you are supporting killing babies.
Oh, I see what you mean. So I understand what you mean, because they're putting it in their bodies. But sinning is it's the intention, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if they're not aware of it, but then some are. It's a crazy one, isn't it? I mean, I'm really against it. Really, we all are.
Yeah.
I
tried really hard to tell very
families and friends,
loving family friends who are very religious, far more, familiar with the Bible than me.
Yes. My uncle is a professor and a publisher in theology for the last 30 years. And he has a PhD. I think he has 2 PhDs. And he's pro-vaccine. Shocking.
Yeah. It's just like it hasn't clicked or something. Like I don't know. And maybe I really, just for the record, I really believe, and I've done a video on this, that the vaccines were disarmed. I don't think they're actually getting injected with that stuff. I think that the White Hats blocked so many other attacks. And Trump would not recommend it if he didn't feel very confident that they had disarmed it. I believe it's the story of the locusts, which is the 5th trumpet in the story of Revelation. It's going to sting like a scorpion. It's probably a healing agent, so it's probably causing some Herxheimer reactions. I've got a whole, we could get into it if we have time, but I've got a whole video on that because I did quite a bit of research. And in that story, it says that the bringer or the king of these locusts is Apollyon, which is Apollo, the destroyer of evil. And it's very foggy, like it comes from the smoke. The locusts come from the smoke, or they come from heaven. So it's very confusing. It's confusing times.
Oh, I see.
But Trump has, he has this piece of artwork above his fireplace in his penthouse called Apollo Led by Aurora. And it's the whole story of bringing in the golden age and dark to light. And Apollo's in a chariot with horses, which is, again, part of the story of locusts, how they will come in like, the loud horses riding on chariots. I mean, it's the craziest, story. But anyway, if people want to come check that out, I'll send you a link to that. We can post that below. But anyway, so I do hope that ultimately people will wake up when they find out more about the vaccines, and that they will feel grateful at the Alliance for disarming them. But you can't check every vial across the world.
No, it's I can't wait when it comes out, and people are going to be really, really impressed with Trump when they find out what he's been doing, because he's just been discredited by the mainstream media so much, and people hate him. But when they find out the truth, their hair will stand up on their arms.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot less people hate him here in the States than you might think. I do think he won with an absolute landslide, and anybody who thought they were a Biden fan are not anymore.
Are you serious? Are you, do you see the difference in America where you are?
Well, so I'm in Maricopa County, by the way, and we have not voted blue since like Truman, which is like, I don't remember, it was 45 or something. So it's been a really, really long time here that we're definitely in sort of red kingdom in general. It's a very conservative area. But no, I mean, the more I look at it, the more I think they've been manipulating votes over many decades. I think most people are pretty conservative in this country.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
So, so should we move forward into this?
Yes. All right. So what is the rapture, man? What a loaded question. I mean, this is one where you just go round and round in circles. There are so many different belief systems around this one, but I shared this definition with you just after our call. Rapture actually does mean an expression or manifestation of ecstasy or passion, a state or experience of being carried away by an overwhelming emotion, a mystical experience in which the spirit is exalted to knowledge of divine things. Doesn't that feel like that rings true right now, right?
Of course. I feel like I've been ascended when all this knowledge is coming to us and we're learning. We feel like we're ascending. The matrix is falling apart. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I feel completely like exalted to know more divine things, because I think what's ultimately been kept from us is reincarnation. And even so, if you check out Dolores Cannon, she has some amazing work. She's no longer with us, but she's basically this hypnotist that can take people into this super deep hypnosis, and they can remember past incarnations and, you know, what their past bloodlines. They can tell if they, you know, knew people, you know, from like, they'll say something like, look into their eyes, because the eyes are the window of the soul. Do you recognize them from other past lives? And oftentimes they're like, oh yes, I recognize my sister, or oh yes. Well, anyway, Dolores Cannon has a book called Jesus and the Essenes. And she's also got she did a ton of travel and education, where she had hypnotized certain people that knew Jesus and walked with him and studied with him. And so she brings a whole nother layer of information that was kept from us. And a lot of his followers were women. And he traveled, you know, the world, and he wanted all this knowledge to be free and available to everybody, not just for the priests, not just for the higher, you know, the elites, right? So anyway, she has really interesting information. And then Alba Weinmen carries out what she does, and she's got all these videos of people doing the meditation. Oh my gosh, Nicholas, this stuff is insane. Like, you're listening to it going, wait, is this for real? But a lot of these people give insight about what's happening. And they talk about how, no, we have 50 years. You have time to acclimate, to learn, to ascend. You know, some say we're not leaving this planet. We're staying here, you know, because Gaia is being healed. You know, we don't have to move to a different earth or whatever. We're not going to leave your family. You're not going to suddenly disappear. You know what I mean? So that's heartwarming for me, right? Because I don't want to lose anybody. I don't want anyone to suddenly disappear off the plane. But I think it's more about understanding that eternal life is possible if you can access past lives, right? Also, just as a side note, like, Noah lived to be 950 years old. He built the ark when he was like in his 600s. So maybe when we're not being poisoned and we're living really clean lives, and when the planet is clean, maybe we can live a whole lot longer. I don't know. So, I
mean, I think when we die, you're going to look back and think, I'm glad I left Earth. I can't believe I was in there.
I don't know. I mean, we have a new perspective now, don't we?
Yeah, we have a perspective of this Earth, but I've heard lots of stories of people leaving, and they didn't want to come back, but you know, they managed to come back because it wasn't their time. But I hear that Earth is one of the worst low vibrational evil planets that we, in all the galaxies?
Well, a lot of people claim that we choose our experience and that we choose our incarnation and that we want the challenge because we are learning and we're part of the intention.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
that when
I feel like I came here to work. I didn't come here to enjoy myself.
you have to choose to have fun, Nicholas.
I have a mission.
You have a mission. You're on it. No
Yeah.
sleep, no play for you. You just keep your work up. No,
but like yourself too.
I don't know. I feel so insanely blessed. I have more in this lifetime than I ever could have hoped or dreamed of. I mean, I have equality as a woman. I feel, I don't know. I feel like, but now that I know how much torture and trauma there is throughout the world, I do want to raise the frequency. I want to change this so bad. I want so bad for this awakening,
Well, you know what? I mean, you will only know when you've compared this life to other lives. And when you've realized that you've been paying to live on a planet you was born on, that's when we'll start waking up to, what are we doing on this planet?
Yeah.
This is my home. Why are we paying to live on this planet?
Well, these people are fascinating. Like this girl here, she's like a wayfinder and she's off working the grid and she's saying it's essential that we connect everybody through the collective consciousness. And she's talking, I mean, Alba even like removes a spirit that's still attached from some war back when she was a pharaoh. Like it's really interesting stuff. So sometimes I'm listening to it going, oh my gosh, my mind is blown. Like, have I really gone this far trying to find the answer?
That's normal. That's a good thing. When you're actually doubting yourself, I mean, what's happening to me is because of that. We're breaking out of the matrix because what we know is normal in the matrix, but that's the crazy stuff that we've been lied to, programmed for years and years and years. Everything we see on fiction films there's more truth in that than what we see in our day-to-day lives.
Absolutely. So that just means there's nothing but possibility and potential. There's nothing but healing and ascension. Like think of it's just, there's only one way to go now, and that's up.
Absolutely.
Well, so, all right. So this is one heck of a screen. I don't want to overwhelm anybody, but everything that Daniel said has literally come true. And a lot of the stuff, if you look at our first video, right, I feel like it's pretty solid that from the date, September 23rd, 2017, when we saw the sign of the Son of Man that we talked about on the first slide, the birth of the Redeemer, where she calls out in pain because she's just given birth. This is the midpoint of the tribulation. Now, again, this is my research, guys. You got to do your own research. There are so many other historians that are coming up with slightly different, charts here. But for me, I'm following Q. I'm following, Daniel. I'm definitely putting pieces together that I think add more to the story. But people have to do their own research, right? So I could be wrong on some of this. I'm having fun doing it, right? So if you go back the 1,256 days, which is almost exactly 3.5 years, you've got a 7-7 there. 7 is everywhere in the Bible. That was that blood moon over Virgo, where it was basically the conception of the child, right? So this is sort of when the Antichrist was in control. This was Obama and the United Nations rising up, again, making that pact with Israel for peace. He broke the pact right on the day before, right around this time. He magnified himself to deceive many. That was the Pope, right? And their disgusting red shoes. Speaking against God, will sit in the new temple. The new temple, this is actually really interesting. People should go research the Pergamon, which is the temple of Zeus. And it's considered Satan's temple. And they moved it to Berlin. If you watch Obama's speeches, he's giving them right there with, is it Angela Merkel? Is that her name?
Mm-hmm.
And the new temple, or the recreation or the moving of that, happened when Hitler rose. So they moved it. The temple, so Zeus's temple was actually originally where one of the 7 churches were on the earth plane in Turkey, in the story of Revelation. So one of those 7 churches, which are actually, don't mean to keep going off in directions, but actually those 7 churches are in the exact same formation of the heart of the bull, Pleiades. So each of the stars in this constellation are the location of the churches on the earth plane in Turkey, those 7 churches. Anyway, so that's just kind of interesting side note. But so, and then he would go forth and conquer and would be revealed. Think QAnon, right? So the Q enters in right around here in the timeline, just after the sign of the Son of Man. So just before, I don't know if you can remember, but I said that the lion kicks over the wrath of God over the Hydra, right? And we get the WikiLeaks. So the 7 seals are opened and the 7 trumpets are sound. Now the trumpets, I think, play throughout the whole time. But isn't that interesting that this timeline? So in the Bible, then it says in Revelation 12:14, it says that God would sweep the baby up and protect the woman for 1,260 days. So that put us at March 6th. So March 6th was sort of quiet. I was looking for really great intel, but it does turn out that's when Charlie Ward was coming out with that intel that they had arrested they had arrested Biden and Congress, the Congress members, after they had done what they done with the election fraud, et cetera. So that all came out on March 6th. Also, that was when Trump traveled to Switzerland to sign some of the final papers for Jassar and Nassara in Air Force One. So anyway, that, again, some of these things in the right now, kind of from, I don't know, maybe from like February on, they're tricky because it doesn't come out until later, right? We kind of find out what was happening behind the scenes later. But anyway, so then in Daniel, it said from the midpoint or the midst of the tribulation, 1,290 days, it would be this sort of 30-day difference. Well, what kind of what kind of drops did we get? Well, we got done in 30, house cleaning, White House secured, final stage. So that's when they were securing the White House with the fence. And done in 30, I think, meant the 30 days in between the story of Revelation and the story of Daniel. So that brings us to April 5th, which is also a 7-7. Now, April 5th was the day after the resurrection, just after everything went down in the Suez Canal during Passover, right? So now we're into some of the Jewish holidays. So after Passover starts the counting of the Omer, which goes on for 50 days as they count down to the giving of the Torah. Remember, I mentioned the Torah earlier because it was very representative of Moses getting the 10 commandments from God on Mount Sinai. So the giving of the Torah is the giving of the truth. Right. The truth. Wouldn't it be so great if all the truth came out?
It would be great.
Right. So then there's also in Daniel, it says 1,335 days, which is again on 12:12. 12 is everywhere. So you had the 12:12, the birth of the Redeemer, 12:12, Daniel chapter 12:12. You've got the number of days, 3 plus 3 plus 5 plus 1 is 12. Anyway, so that brings you to May 20th. This coming May 20th would be the end of that 45-day period, which is considered kingdom restoration. Well, what's happening right now in Maricopa County and, now in Michigan, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully we start to see things turn and we get to see who's actually in charge, who's actually calling the shots, because it could be, a few known characters. Anyway, so the very end of the counting of the Omer is the Pentecost. It's also called the Shavuot or the Shavut. I'm not sure how to say it. I've heard it said a couple different ways. But that, again, is the giving of the Torah, the giving of the truth. Now, some of my dates may be off by a few days because they did manipulate the calendar. But I'm doing a number count here on each of these points. So anyway, May 20th. Is the restoration of the kingdom. May 25th, this month, May 25th, may actually be the giving of the Torah. And the actual date of Shavuot is May 18th. So I'm going to give it anywhere between May 18th and May 25th. And we've got some disclosure.
Or
And then we're on to 1,000 years of peace. Woohoo!
or we'll just say this summer.
Whatever.
I know what you mean. Yeah. I hope. Well, listen, Arizona is being looked at now. It's going to flip. That's going to be the domino effect. It's widely known in the truth community. I've spoken to Michael Jaco about it. I've spoken to Mel K. I've spoken to Jason Q, Charlie Ward. Even Mike Lindell has said as well that it's going to be the domino effect.
Yeah.
So.
And I love that you've got Mike Lindell and you've got Lynn Wood. So Lin. And in Q drops, it said.
And you got Flynn.
What's that?
Flynn.
Oh, General Flynn.
Yeah.
So you've got, it said something like, watch for intelligence. It was misspelled on purpose. Intelligence. So I feel like those guys are like Q 3.0, right? So you got the Bible is Q 1.0. You've got the Q drops that is like 2.0. And then you've got the fact that they're kind of no longer anonymous.
Oh, I
dropping hints like it's going to be biblical, et cetera, et cetera. You know what I mean?
Well, it's amazing when Lynn Wood said, Q is the truth. He said, Q is the truth. He said they want to make me look like a bad messenger, and Q is the truth, something like that.
It is. It's Archangel Gabriel. It's the messenger moving swiftly in the evening offering, just like Clement said.
And Clement said also, we should come a time where there'll be two presidents,
exactly.
a duo president. So nothing is mistaken. There's no accidents. I believe there are many, when the military come up with a plan, they don't just come up with one plan. They come up with 100 plans that are all slightly different depending on what happens. And it's all going to plan. Trump's very relaxed. He's going to make an announcement. I'm just, reminding everyone. I know I say this on the other videos, but there are new people watching and there's new viewers. Donald Trump says he's going to make an announcement. And when the time is right, people are going to be very happy. Mike Lindell's talking about a 1.6 billion case that he's filing for Dominion. It's great, and then you've got Lynn Wood, who's exposing all the pedophiles and human sex traffickers like Obama and Mike Lindell and Obama and the Bushes and the royal family.
Yeah. Oh, he's going after Roberts hard.
Sorry?
He's going after Justice Roberts really hard too. It's funny.
Yeah. This is the thing as well. For him to be saying that means there's an indication here that he's protected, you know, or
absolutely.
Still not protected, but maybe there's a reduction or an increase in his protection, which means they may have been executed or there's less of the deep state. Or do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And Charlie Ward just said that he's hearing that there's tribunals happening in DC. As we speak.
There are absolutely. Yeah.
So that's all also possibly lining up on the sundial just to put an end to this officially, because that sundial also lines up just with that whole, that's a whole nother discussion, but the whole Orion versus the Taurus is lined up when the reflector pool shows the monument, the Washington Monument in this one particular area. So they might be waiting for something, that everything is by plan, everything, including the story in the stars.
So back to the Antichrist, you reckon Obama was just one of them?
He was just one of them, yes. And the popes are definitely one of them. And even
Hillary Clinton, definitely.
Yeah. I think again, it rose up, it had the face on the horn, like the face of the man. So yes, there were people that were deceiving, but it was unique because they could pretty much start a war anytime they wanted. They could be like, oh, look at this false flag. These guys just attacked these guys. And not that they couldn't turn us against each other in each individual country like they did in so many. I mean, we're in US, we're not the first rodeo, right? But at the end of the day, the United Nations stood for peace. Right? It was all under the guise of peace. But if you didn't, commit to the New World Order, they were going to turn the US military against you.
And everyone would be listening to what they're saying on the news and what the laws are, and nobody would question anything, a bit like, these jabs that are happening now. It's
Yeah,
amazing,
and it's
isn't
like,
it? The
know your
power that they
enemy.
have.
I just have to say to people, like, if you haven't researched flat Earth, it's time. You got to know your enemy. You got to know where they're coming from. If they're coming from the outskirts of Antarctica, then we need to know about it. You know what I mean? Like, it's time.
Yeah, yeah,
We can't
absolutely.
be too proud.
No. We have to know. Of course, I'm very confused about the flat Earth, to be honest. I'm not sure if it's a psyop to make us look crazy, or it's really a flat Earth. I have no. Because
Well, have you
theories are
interviewed
good.
like any of the flat earthers, like David? I think it's Weiss, David Weiss.
I have twice, 3 times, and
Okay.
the theory is fantastic, but both theories are very good.
Yeah, I can't really prove the Earth is round, but I could prove it's flat.
I see. Okay.
So just prove it's round, and then I'll listen.
Who knows?
It might be much, much bigger than they say. Like, we're definitely not hurling at 1,000 miles an hour, and we're definitely not like, because even all those planets I showed you, let me just ask you one question. If the Earth is rotating like this and all the planets are on their own rotation, then why are the planets always the same distance from us?
That's a good point. That's another good point. But then it could be argued that, they move. I don't know.
Yeah, well, let me make you a 3D model and then you can talk to me about that again.
Yeah, I would love to.
There's no way they're always going to be the same distance.
Yeah.
Why are they doing retrogrades? Like,
also the moon, yes. We always see one side of the moon. We don't see the other side.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that I've noticed as well. But to be honest, yeah, I know the deep state like to infiltrate psyops to make us look stupid. But I know, again, they've lied to us about everything. So I've got a question mark on everything. I'm open to it, honestly. I am.
Well, I don't think they wanted us to go past Antarctica.
Yeah, but of course not, because they have military there and they're armed, and they've killed people going past there. And so they are hiding something.
Yeah.
They are definitely hiding something. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, once we get a hold of all these books that these Bibles and these additional books, we'll know. It's amazing how much there is to learn at this point, right?
I do believe that a lot of things will be revealed and coming out from the Vatican. I just hope that the whole world knows the truth about COVID and our past governments. I hope the whole world really does know the truth and it will become the mainstream,
Yeah, I feel like we've kind of had to walk a little bit in the steps of Jesus, in the sense that we've been highly ridiculed for being awake. It's been hard on all of us in our own way. So, let's just pray that it's this month.
Exactly. No, definitely. But Miki Klann, it was absolutely wonderful to have you on. I think we should do this again sometime soon again. Is there anything that you'd like to say to the listeners?
No, I would just say, go do research. It's kind of exciting. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of end times. This is a story of how God wins. And it's very, very clear. It sounds metaphorical, but just don't be afraid to revisit some of this stuff. It's fascinating because future proves past. And when you have 2020 vision, you go back, it all makes more sense. And and maybe Mike Flynn is Archangel Michael, and just maybe, St. John is John. Who knows? I'm just saying, nobody knows till we all find out.
Of course, it's exciting. So, I'm positive about it. But Miki, thank you so much. And we'll catch up again very soon. Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much, Nicholas.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.